Hi everyone, welcome. Out here on my bench are a couple of my worm bins that are, I believe, due for a feeding. It's been 12 days since we last checked in on these ENCs. ENC is my abbreviation for European nightcrawler. As you can see, these systems are 234 days of age today, getting up there, fed 20 times so far. And today, feeding number 21 is going to be a nice tasty assortment of mainly cantaloupe melon, and there's a couple chunks of apple peel in there. And off on the side, I got a little bit of old moldy coffee that I'd like to do away with as well. So we're going to get into these bins and see how they're doing and give them a quick feeding. Most of my systems at this point, with the humid summery weather starting to encroach on us, are covered with only paper. In the wintertime, when things tend to dry due to the climate control and the heat running all the time, the air gets really dry, and as a result my bins get really dry. But when the warm weather rolls in and the heat stops blowing, the humidity in the house starts to increase, and as a result my systems are much more capable of hanging on to their moisture content than in the winter time. So as that starts to occur, to avoid letting things get too muddy and sticky, I start to transition from plastic coverings to paper coverings. And even with the paper coverings, right here on the surface, the material that I would expect to be fairly dry due to its very flimsy covering of paper only, the material right here on the surface has actually got a nice moisture content to it. Clearly not as moist as what you see if you just start to skim off a little bit of the top material. As soon as you get a little bit down into it, right away you're talking about material that's got a far greater moisture content. And I suppose if we really wanted to see these systems dry further, we would have to start, either just excluding the paper coverings and leaving them just open to the air to let the moisture leave through evaporation, or even go to the extra measure of possibly blowing a fan across the top surface to promote drying even more. But right now I think we've got a good moisture content. Well, we don't know for sure. We haven't gotten into the systems yet. So why don't we do that? Those coffee filters that I removed from the top over here were showing us where we last fed, which was typically in my systems down the middle. But from what I remember, the stuff we gave them last time was, first of all, not much. And second of all, it was stuff that would, for the most part, get eaten pretty quickly. Well, I mean, part of it was, I believe, apple peel, which would probably go pretty quick for the most part. The other thing was potato peel, which would, for the most part, go pretty quick, except for the actual peel itself. They would come by and they would nibble off all the best portions off of the potato peel, and then probably leave the actual skin of the potato to continue breaking down a little further before they would come back and proceed to eating that as well. And then when you see something like this, like the outer husk of a mango seed, that's the sort of thing that you can probably guess has been in the worm bin for many, many months. Chances are something like this will probably accompany the worms once we decide it's time to harvest the castings out of this system and move the worms onto greener pastures. So we just uncovered a little mound of worms. Oh, you know what? I don't know why, but I somehow always manage to space out on things. I try to prepare and I try to put together my information board and all that other stuff, but I still always somehow manage to overlook simple things such as the test that we've been running in this system for some time now. And I mean, this test even predates the start of these worm bins. So I mean, 234 days ago when these systems started brand new, not only did the worms get put in here, but this object that they were working on in their previous home was also put in here. And this is what remains now of a produce bag that was labeled as compostable. And usually I try to take care in the excavation of that object to try to limit the amount of wear and tear I cause on it by digging and being rough. And then sometimes I just totally forget. And then I end up tugging on it and pulling on it and this and that, and still somehow it has managed to remain as a single object, oddly enough. And I think that in itself is probably one of the clues that's making me feel like it's probably not breaking down. Sad to say. I mean, I think with the test itself started something like 400 or more days ago. I think even last time we might have brought down some information about that test. Or probably a couple check-ins ago when the test had already reached 100 days in progress. I got these kind of two numbers in my head in terms of the actual age of that test. There was the day that the test actually started, when the object was placed into the bin. But then there was a little hiatus period when there was really no activity going on, no breaking down of that compostable bag. So I've deducted from the overall day count a certain amount of time to account for that idle span of time. And regardless of which number you're looking at, it is a fairly long period of time. Even the active composting I measure as being over a year in progress now. So it is quite possible that we're never going to see that thing break down. It'll just perpetually sit in the bin and maybe very slowly break down over the course of numerous years. But then, at that point, maybe it will actually start to deteriorate into multiple pieces, and then I'll know in the back of my mind that that material, the castings material, has fragments of this very slow composting stuff. And that would always sort of bother me, that, hey, these nice castings that I'd like to at some point use for gardening or whatever are still somewhat littered with fragments of material that has some sort of a very, very, very long time period required for it to finally break down completely. So I am definitely leaning towards eventually just removing that object and calling the compostable bag test quits. But I figured as long as these systems are still active, we can just run with it a little longer unless it starts to become, somewhat inconvenient. But I think by the time we get ready to move these little guys off to a new home at some point in the near future and harvest their castings, we'll quite possibly bring an end to that test. If not then, possibly sooner. Down here in the feeding area of bin number 2, I'm seeing sort of a similar situation of some leftover bits of older food scraps. I probably bumped into a little bit of potato peel and maybe some apple peel too from the last feeding 12 days ago, but I didn't really notice it because there is a variety of different leftover bits of bedding and other food items. And if we went at it really carefully to try to see if we can find and identify some of the leftovers from the last meal, we probably could, but that's not the important thing. I think the important thing is just to come in here with their yummy treat and give them their next feeding. So why don't we proceed with doing just that. Here's the yummy cantaloupe, which I'm going to attempt to divvy out fairly to both systems. There's also a little bit of apple peel in here and maybe an apple core. Yeah, there's the stem of it, so there's the core. Now, as far as bin number 1, where the compostable bag test is, let's not forget that we always try to position our compostable bag test in such a way that it's highly likely to see worm traffic. So we position it usually on top of a freshly added piece of really savory, yummy food, such as this chunk of cantaloupe. So we'll stick to that approach and do it that way here as well on this go around. But I think we're almost done here with dropping in today's portion. Trying to do so in a way that's fair and equal. But besides this, I've also got what remains in this box of a little bit of coffee that I'd like to do away with. So we're going to drop that in. And just for good measure, we're going to give them some grit. Over the course of 20 and now 21 feedings, I'm sure the system's received plenty of grit, but the worms definitely seem to like it, so I'm being generous. And this stuff I'm sprinkling in is breadcrumb, so give them some of that as well. So I think that's pretty much it at this point. Not much left to do other than, oh yeah, restore some of these older food bits that we encountered along the way. Let's not forget about that. And then we could backfill and cover up. So I can't remember if it was here in this system that we might have deliberately just avoided the outer edges of the system. Sometimes I use my check-ins as an excuse to pretty much go through the entire system thoroughly to inspect what's going on everywhere. But then other times I try to just force myself to break out of that habitual behavior and perhaps not explore the outer edges of the systems, just leave them be, and perhaps by doing so, you know, add some sort of a benefit. Perhaps not fiddle with them as much as I usually do, because that's just something I always seem to do in my bins, is I'm always fiddling around. Always entertaining myself, and hopefully you guys too, with my check-ins. But that pretty much brings us to the end of this one. So at this point, I've only got a few things to take care of, getting cleaned up and put away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. That's boring. Before I go there really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.